Good evening, greetings from Israel. Everyone's saying that Israel is the cyber nation or the startup nation. I think today everyone can say that we are also the multi-elections nation. We have 4 elections in a row in just a period of 2 years, which is really interesting. Imagine that happening in your country. And I have a question for you. Who do you think is going to be the next prime minister in Israel? Actually, I have a different question for you. How many of you have purchased a PAM solution, but never got to fully implement it across the organization? So in the last, I remember 10 years ago, as a pre-sales engineer in one of the cybersecurity company, I gave this huge promise to my potential customers that they will be able to manage all of their privilege accounts. Sounds amazing. But actually, years after, very exhausted the project, still they haven't got into it. And there are 2 types of PAM customers. The ones who are aware that they're not fully implemented, and the ones who are not. To which group do you belong? You don't have to answer me. But actually, it doesn't matter, because both of you are exposed to this. Don't worry, I'm not going to analyze those attacks. You're probably already boosted with enough information coming from the social media, and also John discussed about it in the beginning. But what's more important is that these are more examples of cyber attacks which involve abuse of privilege accounts along the way to reach their goal. The attackers in 100% of the attacks are trying to push us towards this dangerous sea. And I mean that they will try to first steal credentials. Doesn't matter if they are privileged or not. And with that effect, they will try to escalate into privilege authorizations in order to abuse them to either steal information or to create huge damages. This is the agenda for today. You can see the topics. In the last 4 years as a PAM consultant in the cybersecurity arena, I'm striving to push my customers to improve their PAM implementation effectiveness by measuring their effectiveness and automating as much as possible. Aiming for automating everything or managing everything will lead you to doing nothing. This is why in this session, I will try to focus on the top use cases that are important for you as an organization to start with in terms of automation. But let's start with the PAM solution. So luckily you have a PAM solution in order to minimize those privilege accounts risks. And with the PAM solution, you are able to prevent credential theft, block authorization, unauthorized privilege escalation, and monitor those privilege activities. In just a quick background, the concept is very basic. Every user is a standard user, and if the guy needs to do some work on the sensitive server, through the PAM system, he will be able or she will be able to escalate to a privilege account, which is rotated frequently or as a one-time account. Not only humans, but also scripts and applications need privilege accounts. They run with low privilege and they can access the target system with privilege accounts. All the rest are blocked. And here we go, privilege account management. So that's privilege account management in a nutshell. But the reality is that the PAM implementations or the PAM programs are one of the high complexity that you have in cybersecurity. And they have, as you can see, a lot of elements within its life cycle, starting from provisioning those accounts, detecting them, providing the right access control, who can access which account, rotating those credentials, that's the bread and butter of privileged access management. And then when you can enforce PAM, you can start working by defining workflows and how to monitor those activities. So it's far from being a plug and play. It's a long-term program not mentioning the fact that you need to integrate with your enterprise standards, authentication and reporting system, SIEM solution, and so on. So the PAM vendors actually provide, they do a lot of work and they invest time in automating these elements that I just presented through the workflow. But most of the solutions that I have still have insufficient out-of-the-box automation, which leads to the fact that customers still need to do a lot of manual work during the implementation itself and during the day-to-day operations. So it means that eventually implementing critical use case and critical enforcement is avoided because it's too complex to implement. The second challenge is that if there is a lack of automation, then you're trying to do it yourself. How many of you have heard from the vendors, hey, we have REST API, do it yourself, you can do everything with it. And by the way, it's free. And we all know that there are some hidden costs, small costs for finding the right developers, DevOps team, and maintaining that piece of code that you just programmed. Last but not least, the integration itself is not real automation. You integrate with the corporate standards, but usually the PAM integration with your enterprise is one way. It means that you connect to the authentication, you connect to the SIEM solution, but it's one way. There is no interaction, and there is no interaction between the security layers, different security layers. I mean, PAM is not alone. I claim that it's the most important, but it's not alone. You have additional security layers, and there's not really collaboration. So let's see how PAM can assist you in improving and automating in a better way the elements within the PAM lifecycle with SOAR. So that's why I call it SOARing PAM. And I will start with the first scenario of provisioning those most critical accounts and the challenges there. But you know, there are so many different types of privileged accounts. Where do you start? There are local admins on servers, laptops, and desktops. There are those personal domain admins, which are the organization super users, and there's the rest, service accounts and the rest. But where would you start, A or B? And I put intentionally those two because these are the most common to start at customers. Why? Because usually they have the list of these users. So who would you start with? When I ask my customers, usually they say, oh, obviously 100%, I will begin with the personal domain admins because they are at a higher risk if they are compromised. If I compromise a domain admin, I can access all the servers. If I compromise a local admin, I can just access one server. So they say, yeah, I will start with B. But in the reality, what we see is that most of the customers start with provisioning A. And why is that? Because it's much easier and the PAM vendors provide excellent automation for that provisioning process. So if you have good automation, you will use that first. But the result is, unfortunately, that you have no real impact if you just provision those local admins. And years after, I'm still chasing my customer, hey, when do we start the next phase of provisioning those personal domain admins? So why is it so complicated? And let's see the challenges of provisioning those specifically personal domain admins, which are the highest risk. So this is your organization. You have John, a domain admin. He is a super user. The first thing you need to do, even before going into PAM, you need to restrict John's permissions and put it as a regular user, and at the same time, create his new domain admin on the corporate Active Directory. Think about all the behind-the-scene activities that you need to do, changing security policies and delegations, and notify all of these users. Imagine how many users, how many domain admins do you have in your organization? Think about it that you need to automate this for every type and each type of user. And only then you can go to the PAM flow and say, okay, I will now embed this domain admin within the PAM lifecycle, provision it, create access control that only John can access this specific John ADM account, and rotate its credentials and so on. So, and this is something that the PAM vendors unfortunately do not provide, and it presents a lot of complexity to do that. So what do? Do you go for the free REST API? Before you do that, you need to think about the following. First, do you have the right people to program it with the right skill set? Are they experts in AD? Are they experts in PAM? And if not, maybe you need to invest a lot in training, which means that you need to have budget for the DevOps team, for developers, for training, and so on. Last but not least, who is going to support you when this code breaks down along the way? Neither the PAM vendor nor not the IT. You will need to take responsibility of all the flaws within your code. So with SOAR, I think you can introduce a complete story using those playbook, and you can say that, okay, I want to define this provisioning personal domain admins playbook in one place using plugins that will connect both to the Active Directory, perform all the update of permission in your domain controller, and then go into PAM and provision the accounts automatically, describe the access control for John, and do a special program that will be able to even notify all those users about this new change. The second scenario is about privileged access workflows that I strongly urge you to automate. Providing workflows is critical, especially if you want to apply the request approve workflow or the request confirm. Why do we need this dual control? In cases when we are discussing the highest risk servers or applications. Even if I have a legitimate permission and I want to access those critical servers, having a request confirm is critical, because then I will be double checked by the corporate or by the IT admins, whether it's really necessary to do the activity that I want to do on the server. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe the server is at a freeze mode at the end of the year. So we apply the request approve workflow. Before PAM, those of you who've been here 20 years ago probably remember this, that you had to fill in a request paper form, why you need to access this privilege server, critical server with a privilege account. You need to wait for a manager to approve it within your organization, sign the paper, and then you go with this paper to -2 floor at the bank, present this confirmation, and from the physical safe, you get a nice envelope with the password inside. And how it is done? How is it done today? Completely different. And as you can see, the steps are almost the same, but using emails, notifications, and request approved, then you get the password. But still, it still requires the same steps. By the way, the old version was called envelope procedure, and the new way of doing it with PAM, the current way, by some customers, they call it electronic envelope procedure. But there are some challenges with it. Still, it's hard to implement. You can't apply this request approve workflow on all the privilege accounts. You need to do it only some of them, because it's really impossible. Second of all, it's still time consuming. You probably need to still wait for this manager to approve your request. I'm using it in one of my customers to access their PAM solution. And when I click the connect, I sometimes need to wait, and I can wait for 2 days until they approve, because they get tons of emails in their inbox. So what do? I use a WhatsApp message, and I call my guys there. Hey guys, Can you please approve my access? I've been waiting for 2 days. Send. And then they approve it. So again here, unfortunately, a lot of customers that I'm familiar with, they avoid using this very important workflow. With SOAR, looking for innovation and improving the way we work, people today are looking to do things in an instant way and with highest availability, 24/7. I don't want to wait for someone to approve it. So why not using WhatsApp? I have a better idea for you. This. By leveraging advanced workflows within SOAR, some platforms allow you to build your own automatic system and put all the policies inside, so it will automatically be able to reach decision making in order to approve and this privilege account request. So I just need to type, I need access to this server with my John ADM account. The system will ask me, okay, can you identify yourself, OTP or two-factor authentication? That's the OTP, validating my eligibility to retrieve the password, and that's it, approved. Looks amazing and doable. And this is not science fiction. I'm sure you can look into it later. Last but not least, the third scenario is monitoring those privileged accounts. Once you enforce them and managing those privileged accounts, you can monitor their activities, both in order to have forensics and to have threat detection. And I will concentrate on detecting threats with PAM and the example of creation of a backdoor user. In this example, a backdoor user was created on your Active Directory, a newly created account. So with PAM today, thanks to some vendors, you are able to automatically detect these kind of newly created unmanaged account. So the moment PAM will find this newly created account, it will do two things. It will auto-provision it and it will auto-reset its credentials. So at that stage, this account is controlled and monitored. But still, several challenges. First, most of the vendors provide this automation through scanning in a cyclic way and not trigger-based. So you need to wait 1-2 minutes until this cycle of scanning will check if there are newly created accounts. And what if this attacker is so sophisticated that he creates the account and 20 seconds later it deletes it? You will not be even aware that this account was created and did something on your corporate directory. Second is that the whole event and the whole event of creation of that newly backdoor account will be detected on the PAM scope. What about alerting the others? What about alerting the other teams and systems? So I guess you will figure it out and use your SIEM solution and connect PAM to it. And I really think that PAM is the most critical security layer, but it's not alone. You have other security layers that also send syslogs to your SIEM server, which means that you are constantly blasting your SIEM. How do you correlate this massive amount of events? And more important, do you really have actionable insights? I'm still chasing some of my customers to build incident response for the event they get from their PAM solution. And they say, Yaron, we are fine, don't worry, SIEM is fully integrated, we send syslogs. But the question is, what do you do with them? And more important is, how do you collaborate between those security layers? Maybe the one event on one layer can affect another security layer. And this is where, again, SOAR comes in at the interplay with PAM. Let's look at the same scenario. With SOAR, we are talking about trigger-based. The SIEM receives an event of that newly created domain account on your DC, and then by leveraging the playbooks, you can actually do the first step exactly as the PAM solution does, which means that you can program it easily using plugins and REST API coming from the SOAR platform to onboard this account automatically and reset its credentials. But again, we have a broader view now, thanks to the advanced workflows. So if it's really seems to be a sophisticated attack, we can do other and launch other actionable insights. Like, for example, blocking the originating station, block the source IP address. Or if we think that our domain controller is in danger and dirty, then we can isolate it from the network automatically. And more, we can send notification through this playbook. We can do a lot of stuff. So this is actually the first time that you will have full collaboration between all the different security layers and teams within your organization. So let's summarize. Where have you been until today? So yesterday, you avoided critical use cases, and we all understand why, because it was really complex and seemed to be mission impossible. But this led to the fact that you only implemented PAM partially. And this means that you were left vulnerable to risks. Today, you learned that automation is not just a key factor, but a must, and you must include it in your PAM strategy. You want to do automation yourself? Think again. It's not free and it's not realistic. And I gave you some examples, some real examples that you can do with orchestration with SOAR. And some takeaways, key takeaways for tomorrow. What do you do tomorrow? You will be able finally to maximize your PAM effectiveness with SOAR. The first thing that you will be able to do, finally, is to provision the most critical accounts. Like I said, those personal domain admins and such that you cannot easily automate today. Second, you will implement advanced workflows to improve productivity. If you improve productivity, you will increase your security enforcement and increase your cybersecurity defense. And last, it's the first time you will have real collaboration between the security teams and the different security layers and PAM. That's it for today. I would like to thank you all for listening at this time. I think it's almost 3 a.m. in Japan. I saw someone from Japan has joined. And I would like also to thank to KuppingerCole for inviting me to speak at this important event.